Thanks for joining us.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
Welcome to the podcast.
You are now tuned in to this episode of our podcast. Today we are going to interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in our field. And now, please welcome your host.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brennerl, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brennerl. You know, there's always much discussion. Is there life outside of our planet? Are there aliens? Are UFOs real? And in fact, gets into the news. Just was in the news the other day. In fact, our guest, we haven't had him on for a couple of years, but he is an Israeli American. He's Professor Avi Loeb, the head of the Galileo Project, founder director of Harvard University Black Hole Initiative, director of the Institute for Theory and Computation at the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, former chair of the Astronomy Department of Harvard University, full member of the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. He's written a few books, including The Stellar, which just came out in August of last year. So welcome back to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. You could have saved some time by referring to me as a farm boy. I was born on a farm.
In Israel?
Yes, in Israel. And, you know, that actually gave me a lot of important principles for life. One is my connection to nature. I don't care how many likes I get. I really enjoy being in nature. And every morning at sunrise, I jog about 3 miles or so and enjoy the company of birds, bunnies, wild turkeys. And the second thing that came from my childhood on a farm is the love for philosophical questions, the big questions. And I'm very fortunate to be also a scientist, which gives me the privilege of addressing these questions, trying to answer them using the scientific method.
Which is great. Now, where in Israel was the farm?
About 20 kilometers from Tel Aviv. The name is Moshav Beit Hanan. And if I weren't at Harvard, I would have continued my father's legacy. And we had chicken, we had pecans, oranges, and I enjoyed very much being there, embedded in nature.
Could you start a farm at Harvard?
Well, here I really observe the universe at large. And one of the biggest question on my mind is there a smarter kid on the block? Meaning from near another star. We look at the sky, we see plenty of stars. There are 100 billion of them in the Milky Way galaxy alone, as many as the number of people that ever lived on Earth. And you wonder if circumstances are similar to what we have here on Earth. Is there someone like us out there? And I had a group of religious people show up at Harvard and ask me, how would it affect our religious belief? And I said, well, I have 2 daughters. When the second one was born, it didn't take away any of the love that I have to the first one. And so thinking that God can attend only to one civilization is very limiting. God is not a parent that can only attend to one child. And if we have siblings, that would be great. Now, of course, we might have some jealousy if one of our siblings is far more accomplished than we are. That's what happens in families, but we should accept that.
Now, one of the things that's been happening the last year or so since President Trump came back, is that they've been talking about releasing UFO files, and there's been hints that there is extraterrestrial life. Now, you were quoted in the paper just recently that maybe there's a big object coming towards the Earth, which you said may have aliens in there doing research or looking to explore a planet. So you believe that there are living beings outside our galaxy?
Well, I assume that we are not unique and special out of modesty. We see a lot of Earth-Sun systems. There are billions of them in the Milky Way galaxy, and it's just like finding many houses like your own on the street. Okay, and then of course many people would say, well, you don't know if they have residents, these houses. But my assumption is that we are not special, that in fact what happened to us must have happened to others billions of years ago, because the sun is late to the party. The sun formed only the last 1/3 of cosmic history since the Big Bang. And most stars formed billions of years before the sun. So they had plenty of time to be far more advanced than we are, and perhaps even reach us with their spacecraft. So the only way to figure it out is not to argue about it, not to have opinions, not to talk about it on social media, but rather observe the sky.
But you're a scientist. First of all, by the way, if you're religious, you don't believe that the billions of years we have, almost 6,000 years that we believe the Earth was created. What that means is a whole thing with evolution, etc.
Oh, sure. But at any event, my point is, we should. The fun of doing science is that you can be agnostic. You don't have to have an opinion. You can just observe the sky in this case and collect the evidence. Now, this object that you're referring to is the third interstellar object, meaning an object that came from outside the solar system that we belong to. And the solar system is just like our backyard, and every now and then an object enters from outside, from the cosmic street. And we might assume, like my colleagues do, that these must be rocks, because we've seen a lot of rocks in our backyard, asteroids or comets. But I say, on a blind date from interstellar space, it's better to observe before having an opinion.
But you made an opinion. You believe that it's different than the other things that we've seen come toward this one.
Right, but that's based on evidence. So let me say what is peculiar about this one. This object was discovered on July 1st, 2025, and by a telescope that is 0.5 meter in size in Chile. And the first thing that struck me as soon as I heard about it is that it's relatively bright, meaning that if it's a solid object, it has to be roughly 20 kilometers in size, bigger than Manhattan Island. And it's very rare to get such giant rocks delivered to us from interstellar space. In fact, if you consider the reservoir of rocky material there, you would expect once per 10,000 years to receive a rock that is 20 kilometers in diameter. So that was really unusual that we detected it within 1 decade of surveying the sky. And so perhaps it's not a rock. That's what I thought. So perhaps it is targeting the inner part of the solar system for a reason. The trajectory was designed to enter, and then it has nothing to do with the reservoir of rocks in interstellar space. And then I realized, together with 2 other collaborators, that in fact the trajectory of this object lies perfectly in the plane of the planets around the sun, to within 5 degrees. And the chance of that happening at random is 1 in 500. Why would it be aligned with the planets? Well, one reason is then it could pass close to many of them. The other coincidence is that it gets closest to the sun when the Earth is on the opposite side. So we won't be able to observe it. The sun will be between us and the object. And that's the time when it might do a maneuver, because it's closest to the sun, and it can use the gravitational assist from the sun to do a maneuver that would slow it down for it to visit us. And then it comes extremely close. Even if you take that trajectory and you say, okay, I randomly select the arrival time, the arrival time of this object was fine-tuned so that it comes close to Mars, Venus, and Jupiter, unusually close, with a chance of 1 in 20,000 of being so close at random. And so the question is, was this a plan that was designed by some intelligence out there? It also came from a direction in the sky that is crowded with lots of stars in the direction of the center of the Milky Way galaxy. So altogether, what I'm saying is, I defined a new scale between 0, where this object is a comet, just a natural object, and 10 would mean that it's technological. At the moment, I put it at 4. But I should say that it doesn't look like a comet, because when the Hubble Space Telescope took an image of it, usually for a comet, you see a trail of gas and dust behind it, pushed by radiation pressure from the sun. But there is no tail to this object. There is just glow in front of it. And it's relatively fuzzy and weak. And it could be just dirt that was on the surface of a solid object. It's so little that, even over 6 months, the amount of material to make this glow, you just need to erode about 1 millimeter of the surface of the object. So the question is, if it's not a comet, we don't even see any evidence for gas molecules around it. People were trying to find it using spectroscopy and couldn't. So I'm saying, if it's not a comet, and it cannot be such a giant rock delivered, over.
Well, how big is it?
20 kilometers. It's twice the size of the rock that killed the dinosaurs. It's just extremely rare in space. And so if it's not a rock because it's so big, and it's not a comet because we don't see a cometary tail around it, despite its huge size, then what is it? And why did it select such a fine-tuned trajectory? And I'm just saying, I don't know if it's technological, but I say we should keep an eye on it, because, about 70 years ago, Enrico Fermi, a famous physicist, asked the question, if there are extraterrestrials, where is everybody? That was his question. And by the way, this is a question that every lonely person asks. And, what you tell a lonely person is, you should seek a partner. It's not as if, you are not that attractive. They will not come to you necessarily. You have to look for them. And Enrico Fermi didn't build the telescope. But now we do have a telescope that discovered this object. And, one of the solutions to Fermi's paradox would be, they are not revealing their existence to us in advance, but this is called the dark forest hypothesis. They are worried about predators. When you are in a dark forest, you don't know whether there is an animal that is stronger than you, so you don't make a sound. And so they were silent until, and they keep monitoring us. And, we've been broadcasting for 100 years, radio waves. And so they know about us. But
so you believe that there is life outside this galaxy? You believe that in extraterrestrial life?
Oh, yeah. No, that I think is very likely to be the case.
And where do they reside?
We don't know. Okay, but I would say, just like most humans on Earth, if you ask where is everybody, the 100 billion humans that lived on Earth, most of them are dead. Right now, there are only 8 billion that are alive. And the same should be true about other civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy. Most of them are dead. They suffered some catastrophe because their planet, for example, was destroyed by an asteroid, or their star erupted, or their star evolved and they're not around anymore. But the point of the matter,
that's conjecture on your part. You have no scientific proof for that.
No, but the point is, we haven't really searched for objects visiting our backyard until the last decade. The point is that in the past we were looking for radio signals. This is just like waiting for the phone to ring from a neighbor. Nobody may call you when you're waiting. And we've been waiting for 60 years, haven't received any radio message. But there is a completely different approach, which is to check your mailbox for any packages. We haven't done that until recently. And this is only the third object discovered by telescopes. And it seems very peculiar. So I'm saying, we were blind to such objects before. Now we are aware of them. And let's keep an eye on this one to check what it is.
Our guest is Israeli-American physicist at Harvard, Avi Loeb, head of the Galileo Project, founder director of Harvard University's Black Hole Initiative. We're looking at life beyond our galaxy. So, according to the papers, this interstellar object that's heading towards the Earth, you believe, and on basis that it could be on a reconnaissance mission, it could be something more sinister than that. So on what you base, you say it's not shaped like that, anything we've seen before, but what makes you believe that it's with aliens coming to scout the Earth?
No, it's the fact that the object is too big for it to be a rock, and it doesn't show the telltale characteristics of a comet, and it selected a very fine-tuned trajectory through the solar system, coming close to the inner planets. And, that is a very rare set of circumstances that lead me to suggest that we monitor it and check. As it comes closer to the sun, we will know more about it. One positive note, that if we are confronted with alien technology, I hope it will bring people together, because, all humans on Earth will share the fate of what will happen as a result, and we are all in the same boat. And one way to think of it is, in the context of a messianic age of peace on earth, because when we will see something coming from the sky that might be a threat to humanity, we talk a lot about existential threats from artificial intelligence, from climate change, from an asteroid impact, but we don't talk about the possibility of alien technology, and that could bring us together. And I think policymakers at some point will have to decide how to respond to such a threat. And in the coming decade, there is a new observatory in Chile that was just inaugurated last month called the Vera Rubin Observatory, a Jewish scientist that pioneered the important discoveries in astronomy. We will find every few months with that telescope that has a huge camera of 3.2 gigapixels, 1,000 times more resolution than your cell phone camera. We will find an interstellar object every few months. And we just need to check for each and every one of them whether they are technological or just a rock.
Now, about 4 years ago, it was reported in Yediot Achronot and NBC News, was all over the world, a story from Chaim Eshed, former head of Israel's Defense Ministry, Space Director. He told the newspaper that he believes that there is life out there, and he thinks there is a federation which was signed between Israel and President Donald Trump. He said President Trump is aware of this galactic federation. What do you say about that?
Right. So a few months ago,
he's not a kook. I checked with Danny Danone. He said he's a respected person.
Yeah, and he actually, someone showed me his book, and in his book, he refers to me. And I visited Congress on May 1st, 2025, this year, a few months ago, to give a briefing about my research on the search for, artifacts beyond that came from outside of the solar system near Earth. And in that briefing, a person spoke after me who said that the government has in its possession spacecraft that were retrieved from crash sites with pilots. And I have no way of checking whether what he said is real or not. The day before that, I visited an office in the Pentagon that was established in response to the reports from the Director of National Intelligence. It's called the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. And I asked them, did you see any evidence for something beyond this Earth? And they said no. And so I have to, they can't both be correct. Either what the office was telling me or this person, Eric Davis, was telling me, one of them is not correct. And I just don't know who to believe. The problem with stories provided by people is that you don't know whether to trust them.
That's why he asked by Chaim Eshed. He's a trusted member. He came out publicly in his book and his writing.
Okay, so he is indeed a trustworthy person. I spoke with people who know him. However, he did not provide the evidence. He did not show documents or other sorts of evidence that would substantiate what he was saying. And it's quite possible.
I don't think he would make this up.
Probably not, but as a scientist, I respond to evidence. We know of many people that were put on death row that eventually were exonerated, given DNA evidence that they are not guilty. And that tells you already that, there is no substitute for evidence, direct evidence, scientific evidence. If, of course, I have access to such evidence, obviously, I will change my mind. And, as a scientist, you are allowed to change your opinion based on data. That is the beauty of science. It's a learning experience. In other realms of our life, in politics or elsewhere, people often maintain the same opinion irrespective of the evidence. And in science, you have the privilege of not knowing the answer in advance, just responding to the evidence you have. I haven't seen the evidence, and therefore, I don't know whether to believe Chaim Eshed or Eric Davis that was sitting next to me in Congress. I just, I